She stood alone long before anyone noticed her strength. Her name was Nora, and for most of her life she felt invisible in rooms full of people, unheard in conversations and overlooked in moments that mattered. She was not loud, she did not demand attention, she carried her struggles quietly, believing that being strong meant standing alone. Nora grew up learning that dependence led to disappointment. She watched promises break and people leave, and slowly she built walls around her heart, not to shut the world out but to protect herself. She became self-sufficient, careful and guarded. She learned to rely on her own hands, her own mind and her own courage. At school she was the one who worked hardest but received the least recognition. At work she was dependable but rarely appreciated. In relationships she gave more than she received. She learned to stand alone even when surrounded by others because loneliness felt safer than betrayal. Life tested Nora repeatedly. She faced rejection when she pursued opportunities she deserved. She was doubted when she spoke her truth and dismissed when she asked for fairness. Each time she stood up for herself, she found herself standing alone, facing judgment, silence, and resistance. Her hardest moment came when she chose integrity over acceptance. She refused to compromise her values even when it cost her friendships, career, stability, and approval. People walked away shaking their heads, telling her she was making a mistake, that she would regret choosing the harder path. There were nights when Nora questioned everything. She wondered if standing alone was bravery or foolishness. She felt the weight of isolation pressing against her chest, and for the first time she considered giving in just to belong, just to feel supported. But something inside her refused to surrender. She realized that winning was not about applause or agreement, it was about self-respect. She understood that standing alone with truth was better than standing with lies. One afternoon she witnessed something that changed her forever. A teacher unfairly accused a quiet boy of cheating, humiliating him in front of the entire class. Lila knew the accusation was wrong. She had been sitting right next to him. She had seen everything. Her heart pounded as she raised her hand. The room fell silent. The teacher looked at her with surprise and irritation. "Are you sure?" he asked. Lila nodded, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Yes, I saw everything. He did nothing wrong." The teacher dismissed her words, waved them away as if they meant nothing. The class laughed. The boy lowered his head in shame, and something inside Lila cracked. She had done what she was taught to do. She had spoken calmly, respectfully, truthfully, and still she was ignored. That day she learned that silence was not the only thing used to control people. Dismissal could be just as powerful. That night Lila could not sleep. Her thoughts raced, her chest felt tight. She realized that staying quiet had never truly protected her, it had only erased her. Slowly, piece by piece, she thought about her mother who had accepted a life of endurance. She thought about the boy whose truth was ignored. She thought about all the times she had stayed silent when her voice might have mattered. The next weeks were difficult. Lila began to notice how often people tried to silence her, not always with words but with looks, with laughter, with indifference. When she asked questions she was told not to overthink. When she shared ideas she was told to wait her turn, a turn that never came. It was clear to her now that the world preferred her quiet. She grew up in a world where rules were made to keep people like her in their place. She learned early that injustice was part of everyday life, but she also learned the power of quiet courage. She understood that courage was not always loud, it could be small and steady, like a flame that never goes out. Long before she refused to give up her seat, Rosa Parks was already part of a movement in her community. She attended meetings, she worked with local organizations, and she helped young people understand their rights. She knew that change was built slowly with patience, determination, and a refusal to accept wrongs. When the bus incident happened, it was not just one day, it was the result of years of living under unfair laws. It was the result of seeing families torn apart. It was the result of believing that dignity mattered even when the world tried to take it away. The simple act of sitting down and saying no sent shockwaves through Montgomery. It made people realize that ordinary citizens could challenge injustice in ways that were both peaceful and powerful. It inspired not just a boycott but a deeper sense of pride and courage in the African American community. It reminded them that they were not powerless, that their voices mattered even when the law tried to silence them. Her quiet rebellion also showed the world that true leadership can come from unexpected places. Rosa Parks did not seek attention. She did not write speeches for newspapers. She simply made the choice to stand for what was right. By sitting down, her actions reminded everyone that heroism is not always loud. Sometimes it is calm and determined, it is consistent, it is grounded in principle, and it is brave in ways that the world cannot ignore. Even after the Supreme Court ruled segregation on buses unconstitutional, Rosa Parks continued her work. She became a symbol not just of defiance but of hope. She traveled across the country speaking to people, encouraging them to stand up against injustice in their own lives. She worked tirelessly for education, civil rights, and social justice. She proved that courage is a lifelong commitment, that one act of bravery can lead to many others, and that ordinary people can make extraordinary change. Rosa Parks' story teaches us that change does not always come from shouting, it often comes from quiet persistence, from refusing to accept wrong, from taking one small step when it matters most. It comes from believing that what is right is worth standing for, even if standing means sitting down. She showed the world that the most powerful acts are sometimes the simplest acts of courage, and that history can be changed by those who are willing to quietly, but firmly hold their ground.